Période des questions, question period. Sénatrice Poirier.
Senator Poirier. Mr. Leader, we are approaching the second anniversary of the royal assent of Bill C-13. Next, on June 20th, which modernized the Official Languages Act. Key rules necessary for the implementation of the Act still have not been adopted. C-13 had clear provisions for 2 years for implementing, which will soon be upon us. Why is the government taking so long to fully implement the modernization of the Official Languages Act? And will the delay be respected as stipulated in the Act? Senator Gold, thank you for your question. Not only in emphasizing the importance of the bill that we adopted, but also the rules, the regulations that must follow. I do not have the information, and I don't want to speculate as to the reasons for the delay, but I will pursue the issue at the first opportunity. Senator Poirier, the modernization of the Official Languages Act was to reinforce protections and not prolong uncertainty. If the government really believes in the importance of our official languages, why can't they tell us today exactly when Francophone communities who are in a minority situation can finally find out and see concrete results by this government as to the implementation of Bill C-13? Senator Gold, the reason for which I committed to pursuing the issue with the minister is because I do not have the details on hand, but I do commit to pursuing the issue.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And first, Senator Gold, I want to commend you on your remarkable service to Canada. And now I will ask my question. Senator Gold, yesterday your government unveiled an ambitious plan to rebuild the Canadian Armed Forces after years of neglect, and while it includes some promising measures to support military members and their families, the lack of detail around military housing is somewhat troubling. Such vagueness stands out, especially since the January memo from the Canadian Forces Authority revealed that as of the 668 units promised by your government, 36 are expected to be completed this year. So once again, we see a pattern of bold announcements followed by a rather weak delivery. What is your government doing to speed up military housing construction and ensure our current and future service members and their families have access to dignified, affordable homes?
Senator Gold.
Well, thank you for your important and kind words and an important question. You know, there were two intersecting initiatives of this new government, one on housing generally, and the other, as you correctly pointed out, an ambitious and accelerated investment in our armed forces. And in that regard, though I don't have specific information about how much of the billions of dollars of new investments will find their way into that area, we do know that this government is committed not only to investing in the hardware and infrastructure to defend our sovereignty and our security, but also in the human resources upon whom we depend on to make sure that our men and women in our forces are properly and adequately paid. And housing is a basic right to which they're entitled as well, and the government is committed to deliver on that engagement as well.
Senator Richards.
Thank you very much for that, Senator Gold. But we've seen repeated reports of armed force members relying on, and being in veteran affairs, I can contest to this, relying on food banks and donations to make ends meet. It's hard to take government promises seriously when those who serve our country can't afford the very basic necessities. So what specific assurances can you give that your government will ensure current and future members of our military so they can live with dignity and have their essential needs met?
Senator Gold.
Look, this government has promised to deliver results for Canadians. It will be judged on that promise. It has made historic investments in defense at a pace and to an extent unmatched by previous governments for generations. And so Canadians should have confidence this government is serious about its promises and should be judged by the results.
Senator Lafreda.
Senator Gold, on a appris hier que les organismes
Senator Gold, we learned yesterday that organizations in Quebec have united to launch the first edition of A Day in Honor of Quebec products. In 2 days' time, on June 12th, Quebecers will be invited to buy a local product to encourage our Quebec producers, manufacturers, farmers, and artisans. This is an excellent initiative that will enable us to discover new local products and to promote them. Will the Canadian government be inspired by the Quebec model to launch a similar campaign on a national scale? What concrete steps has the government taken to promote our local products, support our SMEs in marketing their products, and help them increase their sales? Senator Gold, thank you for the question and for having emphasized that initiative, which compels all of us to adopt consuming habits in support of our local economies. The government does encourage local businesses in that respect. There will be a database of resources in order to help Canadians give priority to local purchasing and the support of local businesses. These measures are still in place, and a non-exhaustive list of electronic products in the context of this project invites us all, and I invite all of us to consult that list. Senator Lafreda, thank you. Yesterday, La Presse carried an article in which Minister Champagne referred to the announcement of a federal policy of preferential Canadian purchasing. In the minister's words, not only are we going to talk about it, we're actually going to do it. Senator Gold, when will we see such a legislative initiative? What does the federal government plan to do to favor Canadian companies in public contracts? Senator Gold, thank you. I note that indeed the Minister of Finance did invoke this week making it the purchasing of Canadian products and hiring of Canadian companies a priority. I cannot, however, tell you anything further about legislative initiatives. We will be informed when such measures will be introduced at the right time and place.
Senator Gold, with Prime Minister Carney hosting the his G7 counterparts in Kananaskis this weekend, Canada has a unique leadership opportunity to promote a new formula for peace and security in our world. In February, senators, together with the Honourable Romeo Dallaire, the Dallaire Institute for Children, Peace and Security, the Global Partnership for Education, and the Canadian International Education Policy Working Group, hosted an event to examine impacts from our previous G7 presidencies and to propose priorities for the 2025 G7. A strong evidence-based case emerged for investing in education as a key pillar of peace and security. Senator Gold, will the Government of Canada commit to promoting a global initiative to strengthen education systems, prevent conflict, and build cohesive communities at the upcoming G7 summit?
Senator Gold.
Well, thank you for your question. The government has announced its priorities for the G7, and unsurprisingly and appropriately, given the tumultuous world in which we find ourselves, the focus is, of course, on economic development and national security. But we all know that education plays a foundational role, not only as a pillar of economic opportunity, but also of social mobility and stability. So in that spirit, I believe that the government, well, I know that the government considers that this summit is a moment to showcase the best of Canada and our world-class expertise in many areas. And again, as you properly underline, education is fundamental as we transition forward in this world.
Senator Coyle.
Thank you. There are $300 billion equivalent of frozen Russian central bank reserves held in Western currencies, $22 billion in Canadian dollars. 2 weeks ago, all G7 countries issued a statement condemning Russia's invasion and committing to Ukraine's post-war recovery. Senator Gold, will Canada support and encourage its G7 allies to support the immediate transfer of the frozen Russian assets into a reconstruction fund for Ukraine?
Senator Gold.
Thank you for the question. We know that in March of this year, the G7 foreign ministers affirmed their continued focus on promoting the early recovery and reconstruction of Ukraine and discussed the possibility of additional support through the use of extraordinary revenues stemming from immobilized Russian sovereign assets. And I have no doubt that this issue will be top of mind as the Government of Canada continues its discussion with its partners at the G7.
Senator Osler.
Senator Gold, congratulations on your upcoming retirement. I was pleased to see that Bill C-5 addresses labor mobility in Canada, in that someone who is certified or licensed to perform specific skilled work in a province or territory and who wants to take on a job doing the same work for a federally regulated project would be deemed to have met that federal standard. Unfortunately, the situation is different for healthcare professionals who are regulated by the provinces and territories, but have fewer options to work on federally regulated healthcare projects. The government's election platform promised to protect public health care by addressing labor mobility issues through implementation of pan-Canadian licensure. Senator Gold, can you fill us in on the government's plan to implement pan-Canadian licensure for healthcare professionals?
Senator Gold.
Well, thank you for your question and for reminding us that this is a complex area in our federation. I don't have details of that. However, we will in the Senate will be addressing the issues within Bill C-5. I hope soon, and I believe we will have the opportunity at that moment to ask those questions directly of ministers and officials who are seized with this issue.
Senator Osler.
Senator Gold, I was at a conference recently and had an opportunity to speak directly to specialist physicians, and they were concerned that the wait time to see them for an initial consultation is now 2 to 3 times longer than what it was a few years ago. And Canadians are also worried about long wait times, no family doctors, and the sustainability of the healthcare system. Would you please pass along the message that Canada's public healthcare system should also be a national priority project?
Senator Gold.
Well, I certainly will, but as colleagues do know that the federal government for some years has invested significantly in healthcare, and I know that this Prime Minister has committed to maintain the funding going forward. This is a subject of great importance and ongoing discussion amongst First Ministers and health ministers.
Senator Klein.
Senator Gold, in our sessional order adopted on June 4th, the government included an order of reference for Public Rules Committee to propose rule changes to formalize ministers' question period. This means that the committee can produce a government report, which, because of potential time allocation, isn't subject to Senate groups' effective veto on voting on non-government initiatives. In 2019, that veto prevented votes on 15 House of Commons private member bills in a filibuster. Last Parliament, the Senate didn't vote on another 15 MPs' bills. This includes Bill C-232, which I sponsored at third reading to establish Arab Heritage Month. That bill passed the House unanimously and spent 22 months here. Senator Gold, to establish a fair and transparent system for non-government bills in the Senate, would the government consider an order of reference to the Rules Committee on this subject?
Senator Gold.
Well, thank you very much for your question. It would be up to honorable senators to consider an order of reference, of course, as we all know. In fact, I believe I'm correct to say that this issue is already within the purview of the Standing Committee on Rules, Procedures and Rights of Parliament to study, and could take it on on its own initiative if senators so wished. And so I would defer to the committee to decide whether to take this up, at least at this stage of the calendar.
Senator Klein?
So on a sumptuary basis, not hitting directly onto your comment there, in last year's debate on Senate rule changes, Senator Delphine pointed out that Section 36 of the Constitution Act 1867 requires majority voting in the Senate. He said that requirement implies that our rules shouldn't include vetoes. If senators have used constructive vetoes over the years on non-government bills, is that consistent with the spirit and letter of Section 36 of the Constitution?
Senator Gold.
Boy, you're tempting me to enter into a constitutional debate, but I think, with apologies to the chamber, I'm going to be retiring for this place soon, so I think I'm going to refrain from debating on this. But it's an important issue for debate and consultation. Thank you for raising it.
Senator Carignan.
Senator Carignan. Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is for the leader. Today, the Auditor General tabled 4 audit reports, one of which deals with the following costs related to the Ministry of Defense's acquisition of F-35 aircraft. We learned that the cost of the new fleet of F-35 fighter jets has already risen by almost 46% since the agreement by the federal government to acquire them in 2022. $19 billion then to $27.7 billion. We also know that the acquisition of the F-35s has been dragging on for years. A process was launched by the Conservatives under Stephen Harper in 2010, then cancelled by Liberal Prime Minister Justin Trudeau after his election in 2015, then relaunched by the same Prime Minister in 2022. Mr. Leader, the Liberal government's carelessness, laxity, and lack of foresight have caused the cost of acquiring this fleet to skyrocket. Thank you, Senator Carignan. Senator Gold, you have the floor. Thank you for the question. I was privileged to receive a briefing on the report. You know, there are several reasons that explained the increase in costs of the F-35s. The government accepts the Auditor General's recommendations, all of the recommendations, and has already made progress implementing some of them. It will continue to implement them. The facts in her report clearly show that the war in Ukraine, the changes in the money and currency values around the world greatly contributed. Senator Carignan. Still according to the Auditor General, this new forecast does not include certain elements required for full operational capability, such as infrastructure upgrades and advanced weaponry. These elements would add at least $5.5 billion to the total cost. Are we witnessing an uncontrolled, out of control spending in this matter? If your government fails to present a proper budget, will it commit to presenting a serious and credible financial update to take these changes into account? Senator Gold. The government has set up historic investments for our defense. The Prime Minister has committed to presenting a budget that will explain all sources of revenue to pay for these historic investments.
Government leader, just this morning, the Auditor General released once again a scathing report on the federal government's procurement practices, with GC Strategies and the whole ArriveCam fiasco, citing failures in accountability, oversight, risk management that left Canadians exposed to waste and security breaches. Notably, Government Leader, the AG didn't include any recommendations saying the problem isn't with the existing procurement rules, but rather with the federal government's failure to simply abide by them. So, Senator Gold, it's a very, very simple question. What assurances do we have that the Carney government will give? What assurances will the Carney government give Canadians in this chamber that this type of fiasco going forward will not happen again?
Senator Gold.
This government has made a commitment to Canadians to focus on efficiency, effectiveness of government operations, focusing on results, and it will continue to use its best efforts alongside with the public service to deliver on that promise to Canadians.
Senator Houssakos.
Senator Gold, nearly half of the current cabinet is made up of former ministers who were involved in this fiasco in the first place, and who were closely associated under this audit, including Anita Anand, and was then procurement minister, and many others. How can your government credibly persuade Canadians and this chamber that this is not business as usual and that the procurement process will be conducted in an ethical, transparent way moving forward under the leadership of Mark Carney?
Senator Gold.
Again, as the Auditor General's report made clear, and leaving aside the issues where firms have been barred, and in some cases for 7 years, because of practices that were deemed unacceptable and much debated, the Auditor General's report made it clear that these were the aggregation of a huge number of small decisions made not at the ministerial level, but within various departments, and the government is determined to do better and will continue to work to that end.
Senator Forêt.
Senator Forêt. Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is for the Honourable Senator Gold, and I'd like to thank him sincerely for his contribution to our institution. Tuesday, the government announced its plan to increase investments in defense. The plan provides for an increase of $9 billion annually. Having studied defense spending at the National Defense Committee for more than a decade, I retain above all that it's not the size of the budget, but rather the chronic incapacity of this department to spend the money it's given. The Parliamentary Budget Officer has said that since 2017, the defense has spent $12 billion less than the monies awarded for procurement. And when he'd only thinking of the shipbuilding fiasco, this is not the first time that we've promised to improve defense, the Defense Department. Why can we believe it will work this time? Senator Gold, thank you, and thank you for underscoring the work of our Committee on National Defense. The Government of Canada has made it a commitment to take immediate measures to reconstruct our Canadian Armed Forces. Therefore, the announcement that you mentioned was made. It recently declared that concerns with procurement in defense have been heard. There still is work to be done with regard to this procurement process, and defense is taking these questions seriously. Senator Forêt, thank you. Despite the programs for economic spin-off, the government still has to invest in the Canadian industry. For example, with regard to it invested in Auroras from Boeing rather than Bombardier planes. How can we ensure that the Canadians will have their money's worth and see true economic spin-offs? Answer: the Prime Minister is very aware of this. One of his priorities is to ensure that Canadian industry and workers benefit from investments in this area. And this is exactly what is being done in the planning processes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator Gold, here's another defense question. Canada just yesterday committed to implement the goal of 2% of GDP spending on defense this year. However, our NATO partners, such as the United States, are calling for 5%. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte also proposed a 5% goal, but added a compromise that would require an increase of core defense spending to 3.5% of GDP, while the remaining 1.5% would be made up of defense-related expenditure. NATO partners are expected to discuss raising the defense spending budget at the upcoming NATO summit in The Hague later in June. What is Canada's position, or what will Canada's position be regarding these new higher benchmarks which seem to be being set? Thank you.
Senator Gold.
Well, thank you for your question. As the Prime Minister and the Minister of National Defense have announced and have been clear, the government's intention is to increase and accelerate its investments in defense. It builds on previous commitments, and this plan includes a cash increase, as I understand it, of over $9 billion, 8.3 on an accrual basis in defense investment in fiscal year 2025-2026. That brings us to the 2%. To deliver on this plan, the government will make foundational investments in the Canadian Armed Forces. It will expand and enhance existing military and emerging military capabilities, strengthen our relationship with the defense industry, and diversify our partnerships in this area. With regard to your specific question, I understand that there are active discussions and productive ones going on with regard to NATO's current and projected spending targets.
Senator Daskal.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Canada is currently spending about 1.37% of GDP on defense. How will the government address the very significant fiscal, and we've heard about the procurement, I want to focus on the significant fiscal challenges to scale up to the 2% goal this year, as well as any higher goals that may also be on the table? Thank you.
Senator Gold.
The Prime Minister has been very clear about his commitment to maintaining the social programs that are in place to help Canadians who are most vulnerable. He has been equally clear about his commitment to control the growth of government spending, and equally clear about his commitment to invest in our defense so that we can defend ourselves and be a reliable partner, and he'll continue to act in that direction.
Senator Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Senator Gold, thank you very much for your service to this country. And I'm going to continue on with the questions on defense and go a little bit more into the defense industrial strategy. As part of the technical brief yesterday, it was announced that $2.6 billion would be focused on developing industrial strategy, looking at quick delivery of capabilities, enhanced research and development, as well as things like focusing on critical minerals with dual purpose for defense and civilian use. And that is all great, but I'm going to go back to the procurement question. We know that one of the hardest things to do is spend that money in the current Cold War system of expenditures. However, I will have faith. We were told that there is an industrial strategy being developed, and I'm going to focus on small Canadian defense industries who are incredibly creative. In fact, most of their goods, whether they be drones or barrels for artillery pieces, go elsewhere. How is the Department of National Defense include small Canadian industries in this new defense industrial strategy when normally it favors large organizations?
Senator Gold.
Well, thank you for your question. I'm not in a position to opine on at that granular level, but if I permit me, though, to draw a connection between this Prime Minister's plan for repatriating, if I can use that, investments in defense for the benefit of Canadian industry and Canadian economy. It is of a piece with an overall approach of this government, which is to ensure that we take advantage of these very tumultuous times, to seize on the opportunities, to position our economy, develop our economy, transition our economy, pick your area, pick your verb, so that we create a generation of new and productive careers for our citizens and for our workers, as well as vital infrastructure from all across the country, from coast to coast to coast.
Senator Patterson.
Thank you, Senator Gold. And I may have misspoke. It may not be Defence creating that strategy, but in partnership with Defence. The one thing we did hear is from one of the officials is that there is going to be a common mailbox set up that small Canadian defence companies can actually access into at least the procurement discussion phase. Would you please commit to finding that email address for us so that we can share it with the small defence companies that come to us and ask for assistance? Thank you.
Senator Gold.
Inquiries about that. I have every expectation that the opportunities available to our companies of whatever size will be made public, so that they can take advantage and we can take advantage of their expertise.
Senator Martin.
Yes, and I too wish to associate myself with all the tributes made, and thank you for your service to Canada. Skylar Pelletier is a high-risk offender who was arrested in Vancouver after being seen committing an indecent act in public and watching residences. He's currently under a long-term supervision order for sexual assault and break and enter. In March 2024, police explicitly warned that he posed a risk of significant harm to women, and yet he was still roaming freely in the community today. This is a clear example of the effect of the 10 years of Liberal government's soft on crime policies. Leader, does the Liberal government care more about the comfort and freedom of offenders than about the safety of women in Canada?
Yes. Senator Gold.
Senator Martin, first of all, thank you for your kind words. It's been an honor working with you. But the answer is no. The primary responsibility of a government is to keep its country safe and its citizens safe, and that is at the heart of this government and all previous governments. At the same time, this government is also mindful of the constitutional obligations that it has to treat all citizens fairly, and is also mindful of the responsibilities that are allocated by our Constitution and by our traditions to other levels of government and other institutions within the governing systems of Canada, whether it's the police, Corrections Canada, provincial or police forces and the like. So this is not an example of that, though it is a tragic story that somebody continues to do harm in the community, in any community.
Senator Martin.
Yes, but the problem is that this is one of many examples that we are hearing about across Canada. And another example, Albert de Villiers, convicted of repeatedly sexually assaulting a young child, is already free after just 4 years. Yet the parole board acknowledges that he still presents a medium risk of re-offending. So again, Leader, is the Liberal government more concerned with their reintegration of pedophiles than with the safety of children in Canada?
Senator Gold.
Senator Martin, unfortunately, in a country as large and diverse as Canada, one can always find examples of people, of the system, like the parole board system or Correctionals Canada, making decisions that may be questioned after the fact. But the answer to your question is no. Again, despite the harm, regrettable and tragic harm that individuals may cause.
The
The time allocated for question period is now over.